Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Diggs Dollop. I hope everyone is venturing off and having a wonderful time in their own lives. And if you're not, then this is a good time to tune in to The Diggs Dollop. Make you feel a little bit better about yourself. On the real, I hope everyone's chugging along in their own lives, enjoying themselves, trying to. We had a good episode last week on mental health, and still had a lot of good points of how complicated the mind can be and how it can play tricks on you. And that's what I've really started to understand about myself, is that this freaking mental stuff, like, it's so important to try and tackle it and try and understand it and try and really understand yourself and how you work. And like with me, it's so interesting because it's like like most of the time this brain does not have my best interest in hand. Like, it's so funny because like we grow up in this world and we accumulate thoughts of what this world is, and we are kind of an accumulation of our community, the people around us, the social structures that we grow up in, and we form opinions on how we see the world, and then we also form opinions on how we view ourselves, and then you project that into the world of learned behaviors versus deep down your true self of who you really are. And then you get into kind of adulthood, and you go from school to college to getting a job to possibly getting married or in a relationship, figuring out things like your identity, even like your sexuality, you could be having a kid. Like, we're checking all these boxes, and it seems like there's very little time to really start to unpack, like, oh my freak, who the freak am I really? Because we just have so many things that we have to do, that we're just supposed to do. And then that's why I love just like hearing people talk about like having a midlife crisis, because all of a sudden, like, whenever that may be, like, a lot of people are faced with themselves and like these big questions of like, who is my true self? Like, I had all of these things that I was just doing that society does, and you kind of just mindlessly go through it, check all these boxes because you're supposed to, and because you've accumulated a worldview of yourself and what you're supposed to do. And then all of a sudden it's like you're faced with yourself at a portion of life, and like, what do I do now? Who am I? And you start figuring out, what do I really like? Do I like these things that I'm doing, or am I just doing them because I thought I had to, and everyone else around me was doing certain things, so I just wanted to jump into these things because I didn't want to be left in the dirt. So that's why I love talking about just like the power of the mind stuff, and opening up this window of conversation for these types of discussions for people around my age to start to feel more and more comfortable opening up and talking about, because let's avoid midlife crises if we can. Crises. So I was watching. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, is just like a little bit of the power of our minds. So I want to kind of address our internal beliefs of how we see ourselves. So in order to to kind of learn behaviors of how you view yourself, you kind of have to unpack and understand that part of these learned behaviors are a product of the environment that you grew up in, a product of the community that you grow up in, and you're kind of an accumulation of all of these things. And then what I feel like a midlife crisis is when someone starts to realize that my true self isn't really an accumulation of all of these things. And then you start to unpack and shed those layers of who you gathered yourself and who you believed yourself to be, to get rid of those layers and kind of those characters that you build yourself to be in order to, appease your community, your surroundings, your environment that you learned to be a part of, to then step into who you really are deep down as a person. And in doing so, you have to understand that, these things that I've been a part of have had an effect on how I see myself and how I view the world around me. And then you're able to kind of understand who you are on a deeper level deep down, rather than just continuing that pattern of thought process and kind of the faces and the characters that you have to play in your daily lives. So in this is what made me think of this, because I was watching A Knight's Tale the other day, which is such a freaking funny movie. It makes me laugh so hard. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's a movie that it takes place it's with Heath Ledger. Freaking rest in peace. What a wizard. Takes place in like the Renaissance era. I hope so. And he grows up in like a poor neighborhood, and he's like the son of a thatcher, someone who mends fishing nets. And the whole premise of the story is like he's becoming able to change his path of being a poor thatcher's son, who statistically would probably follow in that same lifestyle and job pattern, but how he's able to change his life and his stars, as they put it, to become a knight. So that's like the whole premise of the movie, and it's so funny along the way. But there's a part of the movie where it's young William, that's the son of the Thatcher, who's watching these knights come into his neighborhood, and he looks to his father and he says, "Someday I'm gonna be a knight." And this dude in the stocks starts laughing at him and goes, "You, the son of a Thatcher? You might as well just try and change the stars." And he looks at his dad and goes, "Can it be done, father? Can a man change his stars?" And the father, of course, is like, "Yes, William. A man can do anything if he just believes." So this got me thinking. Obviously, this is a movie, but movies are so relatable to ourselves. Like we always relate ourselves to the main characters. So in doing this, in order for William to go from just being a Thatcher's son, you have to first off believe that you can be something different than just what you are. Because in that moment, he was just a Thatcher's son that would continue the line of poverty and poorness. He had to believe fully that he could be something different than what he was. And I think that's kind of the first step in what, we have to do for ourselves, is believe that we can be something greater than just what we are right now. Believe that there's more of us within ourselves that we can get in touch with than just the parts of us that we learn to present to the world. That you have to believe that there's deep down a better way for you to see this world. Deep down there's a better way for you to react to this world. And then understanding that your current thought process, your current reactions, your current sense of self is embodied from the environment that you've been a part of. And in doing that, then you're able to see like, oh my gosh, like I had this limiting belief that I, can't do certain things that I really want to do because I was in an environment where, I was told that I need to do A, B, and C in order to be successful. So then you kind of start to believe that within yourself, and you don't want to go after certain things that you really want to do deep down because you built this limiting belief to protect yourself from getting hurt by doing something you really want to do because you were so forcefully told that you shouldn't do those things. And so anyway, you start to unpack what you've been a part of in order to understand why you have certain reactions and why you look at yourself in certain ways. So like in the movie A Knight's Tale, he couldn't start the journey of becoming something different if he didn't first believe that he could be something different and acknowledge that he's deep down, he's not just a Thatcher's son. He's not just poverty. That's not what he is as a human being. So in that process, just like an example that I think about a lot is that there's this saying that one who is aware of fear is not fearful. And to unpack that further, like if you think of yourself when you've been in a state of like fear, say it's like public speaking or something, when you're in a state of fear, it's so consuming and you're so consumed by that fear itself, you start to have a reaction to that fear, and it's natural for the human body to kind of go into like a fight or flight state where you then like you don't want to do it, you want to run away from it, or like it's a super reactionary thing when you're in a state of fear and you're not really able to fully present yourself in a way that is powerful, unique, and genuine when you're in a state of fear, because the body and mind wants to protect itself, because it's like natural to think evolutionary when we were just like in the wilderness trying to survive, if fear means I need to get myself to safety. So just as a natural response, when you start to separate yourself from identifying with those feelings of fear, when it says when one is aware of fear, you're not fearful, I think that means that if you're able to look at that feeling and say, okay, like I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm aware that this feeling is happening, now I'm going to sit with it and let it go. This no longer is of use to me. I'm going to let this feeling of fear go so that I'm able to do what I can do in the best capacity. And this is something that I'm realizing, like, this takes a lot of work to retrain and reprogram the mind, especially if you come from if you have like a lot of limiting beliefs with yourself, or you've been, taking the easy way out of difficult things for a long time, like it takes a lot of work to reprogram being aware of fear and letting it go, or liking to, or starting to like doing difficult things and taking risks when you've kept yourself safe and you haven't taken risks. So it's just so interesting what the power of the mind can do. Like if you're not aware of these things and aware of how your reactions, like your mind may not have your best interest in hand. And for me, like that was, like I was kind of aware of it, but it was not something that I was taking action to address. So then it was just like so frustrating for a long time when it's like, oh, I know I can do better than I am doing right now. And I know that I can like use my voice to articulate things in a better way, but I had such limiting beliefs of myself that I would just keep my mouth shut in difficult situations a lot of the time. And like communication was lacked because I was fearful, so then I couldn't like fully communicate in the greatest way that I knew I could. Anyway, so like this is just like something I want to articulate, touching on last week's episode of just mental health, of how we can start looking at ourselves in a different light in order to expand our consciousness and awareness, and being able to view ourselves on a greater level so that we can believe in ourselves to create change in how we see the world around us, how we see ourselves, and let go of things that no longer serve us so that we can be greater versions of ourselves. And so that's a big reason of just digging in deeper to mental structures and how this wild chemical factory that we all have within us works, and how we can better equip ourselves to go out into the world and be a part of this society that we've created for ourselves. And I think that's the best takeaway, is just that we need to really understand where we've come from and what we've been a part of in order to have a deeper understanding of ourselves, in order to change how we go about reacting to this world. So that's this week's episode, just a quick one. Just freaking go change your stars. Can a man change his stars, Father? Oh, absolutely he can. Yeah, I think it's just like no one really wants to acknowledge that, they could have things that they're not addressing, especially at this age. Like I said, like so many of us are just consumed with like the next step, what's next. School, work, marriage, kids, what the freak. But I think these are such important topics to be discussed and talked about, because if you're not mindful of it and aware of it, then you'll just be consumed by it. So that's this week's episode. Go watch A Knight's Tale. Everybody have a good week, and I'll see you later.